Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined once again by Colin Watt and Amy Canavan. Welcome back to the Bulletin. How are you doing?
Happy New Year, Paul. How's it been?
It's been up and down, mate. It's been up and down, if I'm being honest. Dealing with the usual kind of Celtic roller coaster that this season has become. Amy, how about yourself? I mean, obviously we haven't chatted since pre-Ibrox, and quite a lot's happened since then.
Yeah, it's just been a great start to the year, hasn't it? It's just been one catastrophe after another, so it's everything's one spell.
Well, the big thing about the Bulletin is obviously we are speaking to up to 2 different pundits stroke contributors every day, and it's important to get a wide range of views so we can still talk, we can still chat about the kind of the performance of Ibrox and what's happened after that. And obviously we are progressing through the week, looking ahead to Monday night's game, Colin, against Hibs. So in a nutshell, tell me your thoughts about the Rangers game. We've obviously been talking about it all week. What were your thoughts? Where did it all go wrong? The red card, could we have salvaged something from the game after that?
I don't want to try and use an analogy too much because Kevin Graham might claim copyright on it. But it was like watching an old classic band get back together, wasn't it? It was like when the Stone Roses reformed. Everyone was excited. We had the build up to it. You could see that they were producing the old hits, but they just weren't as good as they were before. The partnership of Edward and Griffiths was linking up really well, but they just couldn't get it over the line, and then something stupid happens and you realise why they fell apart in the first place, and that's exactly what happened when Beaton got himself sent off. It's what will happen if Oasis get back together, because Noel and Liam will just fall out and fight and then they'll split up again, but that's exactly the way it went. It's just it was a sad way to lose the game, because there was periods where Celtic were definitely the team that were on top. I think Rangers were pretty much content to let us kind of tire ourselves out, and then when the red card came it changed the game, and there was definitely a red card, there's no doubt about it. But do you know what, it's good performances, but it felt like the 90s again when Gorham was digging Rangers out of a hole. McGregor was outstanding in the goals for Rangers at the weekend.
We'll get back to goalkeepers because I'm sure the subject will come up again. Amy, just one question for yourself so we don't labour all the ins and outs and all the nuances of the performance, which I think we've already done. Is that the end of 10 in a row for you?
I think so. I don't want to be too pessimistic. I think that you said it himself in the comments. I think people are a bit annoyed at it, but I just don't see. It's not even if Celtic go and get, do you know what I mean? They go invincible or whatever now until the end of the season. Rangers aren't going to drop that amount of points. I think they will drop points, but I don't think they'll drop as many as they need to. I think it'll be like 4 or 5 games they'll need to end up losing, and it's just not going to happen. I think, as Colin said, Alan McGregor bails them out time and time again. I think it changes the course if we have an Alan McGregor for the course of the season, obviously not just for the game there because Barkas had absolutely nothing to do, but it's one of those ones that we never lost the league on Saturday there. The league's been lost. Saturday was just the final nail in the coffin sort of thing.
I think the biggest frustration will be, Colin, at the end of the season when you look back and you look at some of the real transfers that will come later, the real challenges, the title challenges over the years. And I think back to, Celtic put on a tremendous amount of games, a superb run in the famous 1986 season. Because obviously we were chasing for vast periods of that season and we won it on the last day. You look at the 10 men winning the league further back, a wee bit kind of before my time, I've got to say. 1979, Celtic had to go on an incredible run of games to win that. There's been some more recent examples of it where, we've had to win the last 7 games in a row under Gordon Strachan. We did it. So I'm getting a lot of messages saying, come on, you've got to keep the faith. Okay, I keep hearing this. But I try to be a realist about it. And I look at the evidence that we've seen so far, and the evidence would suggest it's not going to happen. But football has got a funny habit, Colin, of biting you on the backside if you come out and say something. And, I would love to be wrong. I really would love to be wrong. But I think that we're clutching at straws if we think that Celtic will go on that kind of invincible run that Amy describes. And I expect Rangers to drop a few points here and there. But the most frustrating thing will be, come the end of the season, if we are able to close the gap. And I think we will close the gap. I really do. Obviously, we've got 3 games in hand, another 2 games against Rangers. I think we'll close the gap. But it won't be enough. And then you'll start picking out specific games. The St Johnstone 1-1, the 3-3 game at Pittodrie, the 2-2 at Easter Road. Games where you felt we should have or would have taken more from the game. And Kilmarnock earlier on in the season, 1 each. A lot of the time it'll come down to looking at the games against Rangers. We'll fail to score in 2 games against them now.
Yeah, and I think that the point you make is probably the point that you'll look back on at the end of the season. It will be the performances against St Johnstone. It will be the performances against Kilmarnock that you'll end up ruined because, the games against Rangers this season haven't went great, but dropping those points makes you even further behind them. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you say that there's going to be times when they drop points, we've not seen that yet. They've not really dropped a lot of points yet. But if they do go on to drop the points, then you'll regret not picking up the 3 points at Rugby Park. You'll regret not picking up the 3 points at home to St Johnstone. And that'll be the difference as to why the gap is so big, as opposed to maybe just losing the game against Rangers here and there and hoping that you can make it up when they drop points. I can't see us going on a run where we'll go unbeaten between now and the end of the season. But I think for us it's about just trying to get the consistency back. We're not the finished article, and it's kind of strange to say that because we've just won the last 9 league titles in a row. But when you look at the things that kind of cost us in the game against Rangers, it just showed that we're not quite there yet. Things like Frimpong's final delivery, our passing, our decision making, it just wasn't quite there. And this team almost feels like a transition team.
See, the thing, Colin, I take everybody's points and views on board, and I've heard a lot of people saying, cut them some slack, they've won 9 in a row, they've won a quadruple treble. But my kind of response to that, my retort to that is only 2 games that contributed to both of those incredible records were played this season. Aberdeen in the semi, Hearts in the final. I think the Aberdeen game, I thought we were pretty convincing that day, I've got to say. I don't think they really... I know that McInnes thought that they were the better side in the second half, etc. I think it's been a kind of feature of Celtic's play this season where we have faded in the second half in many games, which leads me to have concerns about the fitness of the overall squad. But when you're looking at these incredible records, and they are incredible, and they're in the history books, and they're to be proud of, and they're to be celebrated, only 2 of the games that contributed to both of those incredible records, only 2 games were played this season. And that's where the issue is. We pulled a decent enough performance out the bag against Aberdeen. There was some incredible individual skill involved in that by Tommy Rogic and Ryan Christie. And in the cup final, we're sitting there at half-time happy. Everybody was happy with the performance. But we started our best. We tried our best to throw that away. And that obviously contributes to my concerns about the fitness of the side. I mean, we had a championship side looking in extra time as though they were going to win that game. They looked far more likely to win the game. So we have only contributed to those incredible records with 2 games this season. The rest of it has been pretty dismal, right? So we're going to have to look at a point that was brought up, Amy, on Monday by Russell Boyce, one of our pundits on a Celtic State of Mind. And I thought, it was very interesting. It was a great point where he said that when Brendan Rodgers left us in the lurch, let's have a look at what happened and how Leicester played their kind of cards there. So they bring in a new manager in February, and it's all about planning for the following season. So that's what they've done. Now, I think when you're looking at that, you've got to look at the situation. We're in a scenario now where Colin has already said the league's gone. Amy, you've admitted as much yourself, and loads of other Celtic fans are looking at a minor miracle for Celtic to actually get something tangible from the league this season. So do we start planning for next season? Do we start getting players in place for the Champions League qualifiers, European qualifiers? And if so, then surely the first decision that is made is around the manager. We have heard through tabloid press this week that apparently Dermot Desmond has given Neil Lennon the backing until the end of the season. If we are planning for next season, surely the manager moving would have been the first kind of change you would make there, Amy. What's your thoughts?
I'd like to think so. It's one of those ones that you can use this period of time, like you say, you can use it as, right, the league is ultimately done, so you use it as a transition period, a time to build, and you could emulate sort of like what Leicester done. Obviously, all at the time we were all like, oh, why is Rio going now? But in the grand scheme of things, it looks right from a Leicester point of view, because you're not wasting this time. We're just sort of like, if you stick with Lennon, you're just sort of a bit down, a bit depressed, you're just sort of mulling over what's already been done, instead of using this as a progressive period where you could really build on something and start something for next season, like you say. I think the biggest thing for Celtic right now is that the time that we fall second, which does look like it's going to happen, is we're very lucky that it is now 2 Champions League spots. So you need to build on that. Why are we going to wait until June, July? The qualifiers will start coming probably thick and fast in July. Who knows this year when that could be? But you're looking at that sort of time frame anyway. So we should be using this period from January, February, like you say, until the end of the season, and just build something, like the foundations, get them there. But if Desmond's speaking to the Sun and sort of going by everything else that's been done at Celtic this season, that sort of seems far too obvious to think about. All right, now let's think about the positives here. We'll just sort of mull over the loss of 10, maybe look back, oh, but this year we've done the quadruple treble, all those sort of things, instead of really building on a period of time that we could just at least try and get something started, instead of, like I say, just keep mulling over all these negatives that this season has brought.
I think you're spot on. It's so disappointing, because if you are looking, Colin, to be this elite club, be this club who are playing in the top European competitions, then you need to start planning now. There's going to be a huge transition, I would guess, of personnel from this Celtic side. And we'll talk about transfers in just a moment or two. You would expect that quite a few of the players that we have in on loan wouldn't be there beyond this season. You would also expect that a couple, I would reckon, of the kind of bigger names who may have wanted away for some time will be sold, you would expect. And then you've got a few fringe players like Cham and Rogic, for example, who it doesn't look as though they're part of the kind of longer term plan. So you would think, if you're able to cash in on these players, then now is probably the time to do it as well. So in terms of the managers, I was just saying to you before, with regards to who we can and who we can't target, we've seen all the targets, all the names, and as soon as you say some name, so Kevin Graham comes out with Jack Ross, you just see the comments coming in, no chance, we're bigger than that, that's a step down, etc, etc. And then you throw in a name that's maybe a manager who is classed as an elite manager, and one of the names that obviously gets everybody's juices going is Rafa Benitez, right? So you throw that in, and you get the opposite. We'll never get him, etc, etc. So it's a difficult balance to get. So what I've been doing is having a look at how the people in charge, how they normally react to bringing in a new manager. Well, what they normally do in the last couple of occasions is they'll bring somebody in who's unemployed. So they'll be looking at all the managers who are out of work at this moment in time. Now, Rafa Benitez is not out of work. He's managing in the Chinese Super League for a club called Dalian Professional FC, who were founded in 2009. Now, also today it was announced that Slaven Bilic, who I think is one of these guys who's got a bit of credibility, and I'm not sure why, to be honest with you, because when you look at his history as a manager, 46.39% win rate throughout his entire career. He's had one real honour, which was a promotion with West Brom, nothing else to speak of as a manager. But you say the name Slaven Bilic and people think that's a sexy announcement. Well, he's just been announced today also in the Chinese Super League for a club called Beijing Sunobo Guan. who have been a professional club since 1992, right? So for anyone out there who thinks that these guys who, some of them are, and I'm not saying Bilic is an elite manager, I don't think he is, Benitez certainly is, some of these elite managers would never come near Celtic Park. Well, if you give them the correct bounty, they will. As these two names have proven. I mean, why would they go to the Chinese League, Colin? Is it because they're fulfilling an ambition to manage in the Chinese League? Is it to develop or progress their own managerial career? No, it's because of money. It's because of the pay packet. So if Celtic are ambitious and they want to get, because I don't know if you would agree or disagree, I think Benitez is an elite manager. You look at his European honours, you look at the honours that he has won in Spain, Italy and England, he's an elite manager. Bilic, I'm not so sure. Bilic is the kind of guy who will always get a job, right? He's got that kind of profile. I don't think he's anywhere near being an elite manager because he's not won anything as a manager. But if you wanted a manager in the bracket of Benitez or a tier down, if you like, Bilic, you can get him. You just need to pay him the right money. Is that not what this proves when you look at some of these candidates that have been mentioned, that they'll go anywhere, wherever the dollar is?
I mean, definitely. And first of all, a big kudos to you for announcing the name of the Chinese team. That was impressive. I don't think I'd have been able to do that.
I just made that up.
No, but as you see, there's certain players and certain managers that chase the money. That's where the MLS took off. A lot of players went over there to kind of retire for the big bucks. You look at Beckham went over there, Gerrard went over there, Lampard, David Villa, all players like that went over there. And if you'd seen the stuff that came out from Kieran Trippier the other day, he was offered a move to the Chinese League but told his pals to bet on him signing for Atletico, and that's what happened. So he's obviously saying that he believes in his talents more than the money. But yeah, I mean, if you are going to go out and spend the money, you're wanting to bring in a kind of top level manager. But I just think the time is right for Celtic. This is a transition now. The period of 9 in a row is now over. That is an era of Celtic's history that is now about to be bookended at the end of this season. We're going to lose a lot of the players that have been there for the last 4 or 5 years. These guys are going to move on, go and have another career at another team, and we have to look at rebuilding and starting the new era from next season. And if you do that, it's either you bring in a guy like a Rafa Benitez, who's maybe only going to be there for 1 or 2 years, but he starts the ball rolling, or you're going to bring in someone who can leave a legacy in there. You want someone that can come in, that can develop players, can bring in the right kind of players, and is maybe there for 3-4 seasons and develops the next person to come in after him. So you're looking at maybe a younger manager, maybe someone of the likes of Eddie Howe, someone that's still quite young in the game. And you look at the way that they can influence the signings coming in to the club. If you take a look at Rangers this season, Steven Gerrard's not a top-level manager, but he has the drawing power of his name. You would never see Jermaine Defoe signing for Rangers if it wasn't for the fact that Steven Gerrard's in charge. So you do have to have someone with a bit of drawing power to attract the talent to Scotland. So for me, you either go with the experienced manager and get them to bring the players in, or you go with someone like Eddie Howe, who has got a bit of a name but is known for developing players and bringing them through the system.
You know, one of the big things, Amy, we need to discuss this, is when you look at the track record of managers that have come in under the stewardship of Peter Lawwell, they've either been the cheap option, because if you look at when Neil Lennon was appointed in 2010, he was a cheap option. There were other managers interested in the job at that time. That much is 100% fact. But Peter Lawwell wanted to go for the cheap option because it was basically Neil Lennon's first managerial position. He wasn't going to be commanding the same kind of wages as someone, let's say, who at that point had managed in the top league in England, who was interested in the job. So instead of going into the realms of paying a couple of £1 million or £1.5 million salary for a manager back then, they went for Neil Lennon, which was the cheap option. When you then look at some of the managers who have been extremely successful under that tenure, under the time that Peter Lawwell's been in the job, and Martin O'Neill and in Brendan Rodgers, one of the big reasons why both managers left was because of him, because of the nature of his running of the finances of the club, because of the interfering nature of the recruitment, and we'll come back to that after some of Gordon Strachan's comments that came out about who picks the players, who has the last say in it. So when you're then looking for some of these better managers, a better standard of manager, how damaging has the situation been this season to any prospective moves for a manager who might just look at what happened with Brendan Rodgers, what's currently happening with the club just now, and they'll say, well, why would I join that basket case of a situation? Because that's how it must appear on the outside looking in, Amy.
Yeah, absolutely. You just need to... I was just thinking about when Colin was going through his point there. It's one of those ones that, like, right, last year or whatever, if you're thinking about Eddie Howe, there's still... that's even taken away, and I'll answer your point, like, off the pitch, but on the pitch as well, there's nothing that lucrative right now that you're thinking, wow, I want to go up to Celtic. Maybe this time last year you'd be thinking, right, yep, there's stuff there. After Rodgers, the foundations were still there. But something's went drastically wrong. And then that does come to your point that where does that actually feed from? It's Lawwell, it's recruitment, it's all these things. So if you're looking, you're like, right, if Brendan Rodgers is walking away, self-proclaimed fan, there's obviously something going wrong, and it's clear to the eye. So you're not telling me if we can spot it, a top manager is going to be able to spot it as well, that there's something not going right in the workings within this club. So we can chuck about the names of Rafa Benitez, and I think that's probably as good as we get. But right now, that seems to me that's reaching even too high at this stage, because there's nothing right now that you go, wow, I want that Celtic job. I don't see anything. I wouldn't be going, wow, I want that Celtic job. There's clearly big issues, and like you say, do you really want to be working under Lawwell and Desmond? I don't know. I would think.
Well, this is the thing, because as my example showed in terms of Slaven Bilic and Rafa Benitez going to the Chinese Super League, if you want a manager like that or of those ilk, and I don't rate them on the same level, by the way, I think Benitez is a far superior manager, then you can get them as long as you pay the money. And I'm not saying Celtic are going to match what the Chinese Super League clubs are paying at this moment in time, but if you want a manager, it comes at a price. But even if you are able to and you are prepared to afford it, we might have another issue, Colin, in that, Brendan Rodgers isn't slow in chatting. I can say that from experience, having spoken to Danny McGrain, but also I was given some information from part of a coaching staff of one of the sides in the Scottish Premiership, who said that after a game, an away game, months and months before Brendan Rodgers left his role at Celtic, he was bad-mouthing the powers that be over a cup of tea after the match in the wee house that they would be sitting in after the game, which is tradition. Back in the day, I think it was maybe a nip that they had, but they're sitting there having a cup of tea, and Rodgers was scathing of the powers that be at Celtic, and that was months before he left the club. And that's come first-hand from someone who was in the room. So he wouldn't be slow in telling other prospective managers, this is how it operates at Celtic Football Club. And I think we do find ourselves in a situation that Amy described earlier. It's a bit of a no man's land at the moment. We're thinking we need to plan ahead. The league's gone. Unless an absolute disaster happens at Ibrox, the league's gone. And I'm going to bring this up. John Newlands, Rangers only need to drop points in 2 games other than the derby, or derbies, that'll be. Win games in hand, down to 10. Win derbies down. I see this argument coming in time and time again. This is all dependent on Celtic winning every game. And based on the form up to now, Colin, that's not a given. It's nowhere near a given.
I take it what John can then admit to is that the title is out of Celtic's hands. It's not in Celtic's hands. They're relying on Rangers to go and drop points now. So for anyone who's saying that it's not over, remember, it's not in our hands. That is the one thing that you can then agree on. Yeah,
and even had we won at Ibrox, it wouldn't have been in our hands, Colin. Mm-hmm. But we would have continued this momentum that I think the previous 6 games probably started, right? And then you're curbing the momentum of Rangers, and then the doubts would set in over this break before the next fixture. Instead of, thinking, right, we're going to win the 3 games, and I hope we do. There's no guarantee we will. And, we're going to, we've got the 2 derbies to win. Well, nothing from this season suggesting that we're going to do that. because we've played 2 games already and we've failed to score a goal. Yeah, the second performance was a vast improvement, I think, on the first game, but at least we were in the game. And it looked as though we were going to be able to turn the screw and perhaps win the game. That all went belly up after the red card and after the substitutions that were made. But there's nothing to evidence any of these theories that Celtic are going to have this miraculous comeback, similar to the one when 10 men won the league, similar to Love Street. There's nothing, there's no signs. So what you would suggest is we need to start planning for next season. As Amy has already said there, the bean counters at the club will be looking at, right, Champions League revenue. There's another way in there. We can finish second. We might still have a bite of the cherry there. And are they actually conceding it on the basis of us still being able to strengthen for the next campaign in Europe? If so, that strengthening needs to start just now. And that takes me on to the Gordon Strachan comments. Now, I also, when Strachan comes away with comments before the game, when his son is the coach at Celtic, you've got to take them with a pinch of salt. You do. I mean, the credibility aspect of that, he's too involved in a situation to be given a balanced kind of idea on how things are working at Celtic. So he's come out and said, obviously former manager himself, but he claimed that the manager and the coaching staff decides, what he actually said, Colin, decides on the people they want to work with. Well, that's not true, because Neil Lennon did decide on the people he wanted to work with in terms of the coaching staff. But he was referring to players. So the recruitment team, who are headed by Nicky Hammond, present X amount of players to Neil Lennon and his coaching staff, but they have the final say, according to Gordon Strachan, on who we sign. If that is the case, then Neil Lennon's had the final say on all the flops as well as the goodbyes, because we always go on about Virgil van Dijk. We talk about all the guys that did well for us. So we're going to have to say, well, it was Neil Lennon's say-so. It was on his say-so that we signed Shane Duffy. It was on his say-so that we signed Barkas. If that's the case, I think Gordon Strachan's trying to stand up for Neil Lennon, but he's probably done him a bit of an injustice. I mean, does this make it even more damning on the manager if he's had the last say in all of these signings, who so far have certainly not been successes?
It was a bit like when Lawwell came out a couple of weeks ago, when he had the meeting with the Celtic Supporters Association, and he says, we've really backed the team, we've spent £30 million, and you're going, that's not something to be proud about. You've spent £30 million and you're still that far behind. So there is, when you say these things, I don't think they take into context how it actually comes across. You're saying, oh yeah, the management team, they signed the players, and you're going, well, then the fact that they've been rotten this season must come down to the management team. So you're not helping them now, you're throwing them under the bus. I wouldn't have Strachan anywhere near Celtic Park at the minute. I think his time in management's probably gone. I think he's still part of the setup at Dundee, I think, at the minute, as a consultant. So it's been, we've just got to admit, it's been a very difficult season, and I don't see it turning around so drastically. Back to the point you were making on Brendan Rodgers and why he would kind of air his grievances. The way that Rodgers was kind of treated by some of the board members at the time, and the way that Celtic went about their business, was what really annoyed Brendan Rodgers. The fact that he delayed his family holiday to try and sign a player who was on a flight from Spain to Glasgow, landed in Glasgow, and then was told, by the way, we've changed the configuration of the deal, your team no longer accepts it, get back on that same plane and head back to Spain. Rodgers has delayed his family holiday, sent his wife and kids away to get this deal over the line, to show his commitment to the club, and then something like that happens. But it's more than just the managers that come in, it's more than just the coaches that come in. It is all about the structure of Celtic Football Club, and that really needs to change. And when the season ticket renewals come out this year, it will be really interesting, the PR campaign they try and swing on it.
We spoke about this yesterday. Amy, I'm going to come back to you. So first and foremost, before I get on to the PR campaign that Colin's led to and alluded to there, what was your thoughts on Gordon Strachan's claims that Lenny and his coaching staff have got the last say, the final words in the signings that come in?
I don't know if Strachan's wanting to go out for a meal with Lawwell or something this week. I just feel that's a really, really odd one to do, especially like you say, when you've got Gavin Strachan joint onto that laptop. I don't know if that's the messages he's maybe sending to his dad during the game. It's one of those ones. I just don't understand why he's come out at this time to say it. If he's wanting to get back into the club, I don't know if that's the right way to do it. You're certainly, maybe you'll get Lawwell on side, but you certainly won't get the fans on side from those sort of comments. I don't know, I just feel it was very odd. I think Colin said that he's sort of, I like Strachan. I think he was the first proper Celtic manager that I remember. And it's just one of those ones that it's just, I don't know if he's just wanting to still try and get a headline connected to the club. I'm really not too sure, but I just don't feel that the timing was right, what he was saying, if it'd be true or not. It just seemed all very odd, especially, like you say, this time more than ever. He's not doing Lenny any favours, so. I
don't think he is doing Lenny any favours. And I'm keeping an eye on the comments coming in. One that I've seen, and I've got to say this is a minority of Celtic fans at the moment, I would guess, from Pete Rowantree. Thanks for getting involved, Pete. You're commenting on YouTube. I won't bring it up because there is some choice language in your comment. But apparently Celtic fans must be the most negative set of Celtic fans. I'm guessing it's just the Axom crew. Stop moaning and get behind the team. Right. Now, that point has been made a few times. I read the comments as much as I can on YouTube after the videos as well, Colin. If you just stop moaning and you just accept everything that's happening, right, there is no need for any alternative view. So you just switch on Celtic TV and get all your messages from there and read the Celtic view. And what you're going to get at that stage is just propaganda. You're just going to get a message that the club wants to feed you. So they'll get away with anything that they try to do, be that downsizing, going for the cheap option with a manager, failing to prepare for European campaigns, staring 10 in a row, having it in your hand and then throwing it away. So you just accept all that. You just accept it because that doesn't make you a Celtic fan if you criticise it. I'm not buying that. It doesn't cut the mustard with me. You have got to question things that are not going well at your club. Now, if you criticise the club, it doesn't make you any less a Celtic fan, Colin. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're being negative. Now, if you and I are doing a bulletin and I say to you, right, give me your 6 topics that we're going to speak about today. It's actually difficult this moment in time to come up with anything positive. Now, we will be talking about transfers, transfer windows, specific players. You've got to veer onto, if you're going to talk about that, why give a manager a transfer budget if he's not going to be here beyond this season? You've got to then start talking about that. You've then got to talk about why he won't be here beyond this year. Well, that's because it's been an absolutely fiasco of a season. Part of that being what's happened over the last few days, whereby the Scottish Government have been involved. The SFA have been told to investigate Celtic and they've refused to do so. So you've got to talk about these topics because by their very nature they are topical. And then the narrative of a show like the Axom Bulletin or any Celtic podcast out there, because I can see the same kind of stick being given out to all the other excellent productions out there, be that 4 Tims in a Pod, the Celtic Ends, the Cynic, the 20 Minutes. I can see it. Gig Pod, they're all getting the same kind of stick, Colin. I mean, for me, this was the reason why Celtic fans back in the 80s, and even before then, set up their own fanzines. Because what they were being fed was just a party line. We actually used to call the Celtic Review Pravda, right, which was basically Russian propaganda. So we didn't even believe that the letters in the Celtic View were genuine. We thought it was board members writing to say the board are great, they run this club brilliantly. Meanwhile, the stadium's falling to bits and we're in debt. So that's why Celtic fanzines were formed. And from that, as a young Celtic fan, I was reading fanzines thinking to myself, well, I'd much rather read about Frank McAvenny and Paul McStay. But this fanzine's educating me about what's wrong at the club. It's telling me that we need to go public. We need to be a PLC. They were talking about that, Colin, in 1987. All the guys at the Not the View, Joe Miller, and all the people that have been there from day one. Unbelievable foresight. And that's from a street movement, and that's from the fans. So for anyone to say, oh, stop moaning. We're 19 points behind Rangers. We were miles, and I mean galaxies ahead of Rangers during most of the 9 in a row period. And we've allowed the team to catch us up and sprint ahead of us. And we're sitting, people going on about being asleep at the wheel. Our car doesn't have any wheels on it. Our car's parked up on the side of the street, with steam coming out the engine. Our car's done, and Rangers are careering down that motorway. That's one for Kevin Graham, because I know he's the king of the analogies. But people can't say you cannot moan about Celtic. It's an absolute nonsense, Colin.
I hope the guy that sent that in's now happy. We've now got the 3 or 4 minute clip of the triggered rant that we'll be putting on the Celtic State of Mind YouTube page very shortly. But no, you're spot on. It's not North Korea. It's not Donald Trump's fake news. This is the time for us as fans to air the grievances that we've got. It's the only outlet that you've got to do that. We're not getting down to the pubs. You can't speak with your pals around the pubs. You can't speak with your pals at the games. You can't voice your discontent at the games. This is an opportunity for all voices to be heard. And the fact that you have put it across there and you've shared that guy's view shows that we'll cover the views of all fans, no matter what they think of Celtic and their performances this season. But the thing is, if you'd said to someone at the start of the season, we're going to be 19 points behind in January, we're going to be at the stage where none of the key players this season have really performed for us, would you be happy with that? You can guarantee that no Celtic fan would turn around and say, I'll take that by the time it comes round to January. So why is it acceptable now? It's got to be either you are honest with yourself and you're realistic, or you just continue to put the green tinted specs on and just hope that everything will turn round.
And keep the faith, hashtag. Amy, what's your feelings on that? Because I know that you're far, far younger than the likes of myself, so your point of reference in terms of coming into the way of supporting Celtic, that, being passed down from your father and members of your family. But largely you have seen a successful Celtic side. You're now faced with a situation where there's a lot of unhappiness, there's protests at the park. Can you see it from both sides, even though you've been born into a team that has enjoyed domination?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you just have to be able to see it from both sides. It's one of those ones that I think maybe because all I've seen is domination, or the majority is domination, is that you've just got to, I don't know, I think right now maybe I'm still just a little bit like looking back on, all right, the 9 was great and all of that. So it's a sticky situation, and I do find it quite hard. And I've never seen I think I can sort of remember the Tony Mowbray era and Rangers, I think the last time they were dominant. But other than that, like, I've never really went to Ibrox and never really picked up a win sort of thing. And I know that's really selfish and sort of thing. But yes, it's a sticky situation right now, and it's not one that I wish to have been looking on quite so early, but here we are.
No,
exactly. Keeping this positivity going, Amy, what was your first Celtic game?
What was the first game I was at?
Yeah.
I don't even know. That's really bad. It was St Johnstone. It was against St Johnstone, but I can't even tell you. It was St Johnstone. That's really bad.
Keep the positivity going. We'll throw in the past successes, and that might keep some of the people that's commenting happier.
There we go, exactly.
The big thing about Celtic and what you learn once you've been through some of these situations or some of these periods of the pendulum swinging the other way, and it's not meant to come across as a Celtic Dad comment, when you do think back to the dark old days, you always know, no matter what, that Celtic will come good, Celtic will turn the corner, Celtic will be champions again, you know that. But it's still frustrating when you see that the signs were there. Colin, you were very early in saying that Neil Lennon should have gone. You said it after the Ferencváros game. I was a little bit later to jump on your bus because I was Pittodrie. I was the 3-3 game at Pittodrie. But the signs have been there for some time, and it's the failure to act on them, even today, even to this moment, whereby, as far as we're aware, because we think the update has been given to a tabloid newspaper, Neil Lennon will be the manager till the end of the season. Now, Stevie Ray comes in to make the point on YouTube. The common perception is that the players who performed under Rodgers have regressed under Lennon. So why do fans expect our summer signings to improve or live up to their reputations? Now, one of the interesting things about the summer signings that have come in is that Colin already said about memes and all the rest of it. Yeah, if you say something that gives someone a good laugh, even months later, it will be turned into a meme and it will end up on Kerryfield, which is on Twitter. And that's just the way it is. Now, I like a bit of humour and all the rest of it. So if you're going to make a comment, and when you're covering every detail of Celtic, you're going to get some wrong calls, Colin, right? So if you come out and say, wow, best transfer window of all time or of recent memory, and then this happens, then you look like a bit of a dafty. But you've just got to take it, because that was the comment at the time. So go into Stevie Ray's comment there on YouTube. I would pinpoint someone who doesn't seem to get that many mentions these days. It's all about Barkas and Duffy. We spent £5 million on Albion Ayeti, Swiss internationalist, who had obviously made his name at Bâle alongside El Younousi, who's also been a bit of a flop and disappointment this season. Before, I think it was an £8 million move to West Ham. We buy him for £5 million. You know, is he the signing of the summer? He barely plays. He doesn't look fit yet, and he certainly doesn't look to be in the top two in terms of a jersey up top. So what Stevie Ray has said there, I would say one of the biggest examples of that is Albion Ayeti. So if you're coming into the Celtic side as it stands at the moment, even Laxalt, I think his earlier performances were far better than what they are now. Is it a case of this culture that Neil Lennon brought up, so I'm going to keep bringing it up myself, that he's instilled and implemented at Celtic, doesn't allow players to thrive, doesn't allow players to develop and progress? Amy, how disappointed have you been in the aforementioned summer signings? I know that obviously Turnbull has come in and been one of the star men, and I think that's going to continue until the end of the season. But Albion Ayeti, you know, we're in January, he's not fit, he's not playing, £5 million. Is it any worse than the Barkas signing at this stage?
I don't know, it's a really odd one. I think Ayeti just sort of seems like a lost man wherever he goes. I think I remember at the time, David Moyes was sort of like, who is he? There was one of, like, nobody sort of knows where he's at. Started off, he was a bit of a poacher. He was scoring a few decent goals. That was all that was really mattered, and he was winning games and got the winner against Dundee United. And then he's just flown so far off the radar. You just sort of even forget that he's at the club. Barkas, I don't really know what else there is to say. It's one of those ones, yep, he's came back in, sort of done fine since, but I just feel for Connor Hazard, I do. Duffy, it's just not worked out. Like you say, Turnbull's a chink of light, there's something at least a little bit positive there, but I don't know, it's just one of those ones that there's definitely the negatives are yet again outweighing the positives, and I know that sort of just seems not natural to say at this point, but it's just the way it is. It
certainly is. Now, we've mentioned Turnbull, and I've seen some really interesting images, because obviously the Celtic Twitter account, whoever deals with the socials, have been told, put out as many pictures as possible of the team working hard, because this isn't a jolly. This isn't rest and recuperation, this is a training camp, so make sure you take pictures and put them out on Twitter. So you've seen the dreaded bleep test, Colin, and I've been critical of Celtic's fitness, because I just feel, you know, when you're shipping 15 goals out of 41 this season, 15 of them have been in the last 20 minutes, and one of them was in extra time against Hearts, and in the last stages of the game, 15 goals Celtic have conceded. Would that point to a lack of game management, a lack of discipline in terms of keeping your shape and seeing a game out, or a lack of fitness? What's your thoughts on that, Colin?
I think it's a combination of everything that you've just said. Game management, if you go to the game management, you're thinking back to the Aberdeen game where you managed to turn it round, you're 3-2 up, you're looking to sort of see out the game, kill time, stick the ball in the corner, stick the ball into the stands, doesn't matter. And we don't manage to do that. Fitness, you've seen at times, especially I think back to European performances, where it's got to the last 10 minutes of the game and you just see players that are kind of completely knackered. Formation, as it came down to that, as it came down to positioning, there's been a lot of that. And to be perfectly honest, there's no one thing that is the issue with Celtic this season. But what it does come down to is that if we're not reviewing the progress that we're making this season, you'll see that no one has made any sort of progression as a player. Maybe David Turnbull at a push in his Malasoro, but everyone else seems to have regressed this season, and that's something that the coaching staff has to look at and try and stop this slump. You look back at Albion Ayeti, one of his best performances was the Lille game. That was an outstanding performance that night. Mm-hmm. Scored 5 goals in his first 6 games. So he's not really started a game since. It's when he has started, he's been the lone striker and he doesn't suit it. He'd be better as a 2. but we don't seem to play it. And now we've got into this kind of team that is playing well and is working together, and he'll struggle to get in there because Griffiths and Edward are a fantastic partnership. It would take an injury or a suspension for him to get back into the side, but I just wouldn't write him off yet.
No, I think when you've invested that kind of money, and that's probably why, going back to what Amy said about feeling sorry for Hazard, I think it's the only reason he's been dropped. I'm not going to say that Peter Lowell picks the team. He might pick signing targets, etc., and coaching staff. I'm not going to say he picks Neil Lennon's team, but when Lennon came out and said we've spent £5 million on him for him to be the number one, so he's going to be the number one, I found that quite an interesting statement as well, because surely your number one's the guy that's playing best. And if you've lost the gloves, and Conor Hazard, yeah, you can maybe point to a couple of mistakes in the Scottish Cup final, he still won us the game. He still made the decisive saves in the penalty shootout to win us that game. Did he make any big howlers that would suggest he should have been dropped? I don't think he did. So we've signed a guy for £5 million, he's got to play, but Albion Ayeti's a different kettle of fish at this moment in time. Now, when we're talking about transfers, and by the way, Jimmy Wren, I agree with that. We haven't put 90 minutes together all season. Disgraceful that this Celtic team aren't fit. I'm asking, is it a fitness thing? Is it a combination, as Colin suggested, of a few different factors? I hope it's not fitness, because that should be a prerequisite at this level of football, I would think. But obviously once we come back from Dubai, we'll be really fit, because we're doing bleep tests and all that kind of stuff. I remember reading, Paul Scholes, I think it was, could run the bleep test out. Him and David Beckham, they could run it out. So I don't know what level it goes to. I think it's like 15, when it's just like a bleep every few seconds, and they could run it out, and I'm not sure any of the Celtic players could at this moment in time. Who's the fittest over 10k, is it, or the quickest? Is it Greg Taylor?
Oh, is it when Greg Taylor says that he'd run 5k in about 12 minutes or something like that?
Oh, was it 5k? 5k, 10k, who knows? I mean, I don't do it, so it wouldn't make any difference to me. So when we're looking at the transfer window, I find it difficult at this moment in time, because Neil Lennon came out a wee while ago to say that there's not going to be that much change in terms of transfers. He's happy with the balance of the side. Then Julian collides with a post. So everything changes. Shane Duffy comes back from Dubai. It's for personal reasons. Who knows what's going to happen with Shane Duffy? A lot of fans were wanting that loan deal to be cut short. Who knows if you can even do that? There might be a clause in there whereby we have to give them a lot of money if we cut it short. So we've got to enter the transfer market. We're doing it with a manager who I don't think will be here at the end of this season. I would be very surprised if he was. I think the next managerial appointment or the next managerial move will show us as Celtic fans what the ambition of the Celtic board actually is going forward.
Yeah. I think the fact that they've come out and they've backed Neil Lennon once again, and not looked at even trying to bring in a replacement, suggests that it's sort of that's it. That's all we're doing this season. And the January transfer window will be interesting to kind of further strengthen that, whether that's going to be we're starting to build for next season, or they've still got belief that something can turn around. But if you're a Celtic fan looking at it, most Celtic fans would say the fact that they're going to keep Neil Lennon on, this promised progress review that they were going to do was completed in about 30 seconds, quicker than you can get a quote for car insurance these days. That's it. They've accepted their fate and they're moving on.
It looks that way. Now, Joe Porter, spot on, should act now for next season. I think it's only wise to do that. And on Facebook, top manager will be appointed in May to sell season tickets. I was going to bring this up because it was a point raised by Kevin Graham the other day. He was probably called negative for raising it. But when it comes round to season ticket renewal time, it's going to be harder, no matter what, to renew for clubs to get renewals in, Colin, because of the financial constraints a lot of people are going to be under. Many people will be under, and the fear of the unknown. People don't know what the future holds financially in their workplace. So yeah, a season ticket may be looked upon, right, and this might ruffle a few feathers, as one of these luxury items that people can't afford anymore, right? That's how difficult it can be. So Kevin made the point that it may be very difficult to sell it, and then we spoke yesterday about what would the charm offensive be. Is that what the club are looking for? They've got the white flag up in terms of the league, but they're thinking, well, the only way we're going to shift tickets is with this managerial announcement. Amy, do you think they're that forward thinking?
Forward thinking is probably not the words I'd use with them, but it's one of those ones that I don't think it's even forward thinking. I think it's just right. They'll just think, how do we get money? Because that's all that they care about. I think forward thinking would be taking action now. Because I think it'd be a step out the box for them to listen to the fans for once. There's a starter, but no, I think if there is going to be a manager, I think they're right. I think it will be May, right before season tickets, like you say, get announced and that you need to get them in. It's just all money. That's all it is at this stage.
See, the thing on that as well is, when is the forms going to come out? Because they came out really early last year. They came out around about March time. The kind of the promotional sign up, let's win the 10 sort of thing came out around about March. So if you're going to have a new manager in by then, you're going to have someone in by the end of the season. Otherwise, the extensions that they grant year after year is just going to roll on and roll on and roll on.
Kevin Graham sticking with Jack Ross. Now I can see the board looking along those lines. I mean, I've said in a previous podcast a few times, in actual fact, that they had already made inquiries about Alex Neil, which was universally derided, but it wasn't my view. It's not that I think we should go for him. It's just the information that was given to us was that the club were interested in someone of that kind of type, of that stature in terms of management. And you look at the job that Alex Neil done at Hamilton. I thought he done particularly well, and obviously he came up through the ranks as a youth team manager right through, and a lot of the players that developed at the same time as him as a manager. He initially done really well at Norwich. He was then relegated, and then obviously the stock goes up and down then, Colin. But I just think Celtic fans, myself included, need to think about, well, if we wanted a manager, like I said at the top of the show, of the stature of Benitez, we could get him if we were prepared to pay the money. There's nothing in Scotland that's going to stop them from coming here. And I think that today's appointment of Slaven Bilic is interesting in that, he was an ex-West Ham manager at the beginning, or at some point during the season. If you said Davy Moyes, people were saying no chance, wouldn't have him anywhere near Celtic. Would Davy Moyes and his coaching staff, would the Celtic team be more organised than it is just now? Would we have a game plan? Would we look fitter? I think we would. So I just think it's about managing expectations now, Colin. At this moment in time, I don't think we could get Davy Moyes.
No, he's doing a fantastic job at West Ham. What I've seen from them this season's been really impressive. And you're kind of left in this scenario where anytime the Celtic job comes up, it's the same names that keep getting thrown forward. You mentioned Alex Neil. You keep seeing guys that have been there before, and you even see Henrik Larsson getting quoted all the time. It's about thinking outside the box and going forward this season. As I said earlier on, this is the bookend of the 9-in-a-row era. If you win 10, that's a fantastic end to it. But no matter whether you'd won 10 this season or you didn't win 10, it was going to be the end of the road, because as you say, it's the struggle to get the momentum going for players to go, well, I've won 10, do I want to go and win 11 and 12, or do I want to then go on and develop my career elsewhere? You've seen guys that have left the club, like Kieran Tierney that's moved on, Moussa Dembele, all went on to improve their careers as they move forward. And I think there's a couple of players in that Celtic team that want to do that as well. So no matter how this is a natural end to that era this season, and going forward it's a complete rebuild.
Well, the thing is as well, Colin, on that point, if it's the end of an era, we need to start rebuild. We need to start doing it right now. This is a big issue. And Amy, we see, a lot of people coming in and they're maybe resigned to the fact that Neil or Ross is going to be the kind of level that the board targets. But there's other comments coming in saying that's because the board are going to target someone that can be controlled to a degree. And obviously the minute someone like O'Neill or Rodgers comes in, they start demanding and pushing the envelope out, and they're maybe given a budget and they've already pushed that to 9 million to bring Dembele in, then they want to push it a wee bit further to bring in Castagne, because what was the feedback then, Colin? 10, 11, they were talking at the time.
Something like that, yep.
He ended up going for 16 or 18 million, but a manager at that level won't work under those kind of constraints for that long. They will start challenging it, they'll start pushing the board, and you remember the famous discussion that O'Neill had on his way back from a 3-0 Shakhtar Donetsk defeat, where he said, I need to buy this player, I need to buy this player, I need to buy this player, and he was told that's not happening, because we need to make sure that we make a profit. We need to make sure that financially the club's stable. So there will come that point. I've also seen Stevie Clark's name mentioned. Paul Scal, thanks for bringing that up. We actually had Stevie's nephew on the show, Eddie Clark, who is a musician. We spoke about it even back then, Colin. I don't know if you remember, it must have been about 18 months ago. And we did speak about Stevie Clark, obviously, from a Celtic family. And, you know, when you're looking at Stevie and the job he's done at Scotland, I think he's done particularly well at Scotland. I think that he's been interviewed previously for the job. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember who got the job at the time. I think it was when Ronnie Dyler got the job. Stevie Clark was interviewed then. He's since spoken about the issues that operating within Glasgow bring. He was talking about the sectarianism, wasn't he, when he was the manager of Kilmarnock, and the fact that he didn't want to expose his family to that. So although I think Steve Clark would actually solve quite a lot of our problems that we're facing at this moment in time, I don't think it will be an appointment the Celtic board will look at. Now, before we wrap up today, we've not even spoke about Dubai. So that was obviously the conversation piece over the last few days. So we all knew they were going. We all knew that the Hibs game had been rescheduled for Monday night. Celtic, I wouldn't have expected any less, went through all the normal protocols. It was all signed off. Then, because of the pandemic, because of the run of form, because of the poor, the defeat on Saturday, the images that appeared, Colin, created what could only be described as a furore online. They've been name-checked, they've been mentioned by Nicola Sturgeon, who seems to love giving Celtic a boot whenever she can. But it turns out that we've done nothing wrong, as we all knew at the same time that the Sturgeon was on, try to tear us a new backside. And the SFA have said they're not investigating it. So what is the kind of takeaway from this one, Colin? I mean, PR disaster from Celtic?
Yeah, pretty much. As much as we say nothing's been broken by the law or by procedures or something like that, we didn't need to go to Dubai. There was absolutely no need to go to Dubai. There was nothing that justified us going there in the middle of a global pandemic. We speak about all these players that go away on international duty and then come back and test positive. We don't want to travel away in bubbles. There's just absolutely no need for it. I get everyone saying, yeah, they were able to go and relax, and we would do it every other year and this and that and the next thing, but just there was no need. It was absolutely no need. Nobody's saying that it was illegal or whatever, but they just didn't need to do it. And the fact that they couldn't really read the room as to the fans' response on it, and they kept posting the pictures saying, boys are working hard in Dubai, that was daft. And I think it's something they'll look back on as something that they really shouldn't have done.
No, definitely. When I did see the comments coming out, and I've watched them back quite a few times, and Nicola Sturgeon is aware of images and she's seen these images, and you think, how ill-informed was that though for Nicola Sturgeon to come away with that when Celtic had gone through all the right channels? Now, by the way, I agree with you, Colin, we shouldn't be over there, right? We absolutely shouldn't, but it does seem as though they're very quick to give Celtic a kick in. The ball and goalie gate, couldn't wait to suspend us for a couple of games, which obviously we've still not played. Yeah, we've done it wrong. We've done that wrong with regards to ball and goalie, or the player did. Did the club really need to get that kind of sanction at the time? And I just feel that there was this propensity by Nicola Sturgeon to give Celtic a kick in, and hopefully that slapped her down a wee bit. What's your thoughts on that, Amy?
I don't know, it's just one of those ones, I think more than anything right now, is that I don't even really, I think Nicola Sturgeon's, I think she is maybe going in a little bit on Celtic, but then again, she's sort of got every right to. Why is it like Celtic, they're just there's just such a gap between fans and Celtic right now. Like as Colin said, read the room. It's a global pandemic, the gap between, like, I can't go to, like, I don't know, just down the road, but they can go to Dubai sort of thing. It's like, it's feeding into that narrative that it's one rule for footballers or one rule for everybody else, and it's just not helping anyone, and it's just, they're so far out of touch with fans right now. Like you say, results aside, even if one on Saturday, results aside, it's a global pandemic. What is the need for Dubai? Like, I think that was one of the points, wasn't it? It was like, oh, there has to be like a purpose to go, and it was all training and whatnot. But why can you not just go up north or something like that? Just, I don't know, if you need to be out, if there needs to be a need to be away, why does it need to be Dubai?
And here's the thing as well, what we've not spoke about is we moved that game to Monday night, so we've got a couple of days now before that game. We're flying home on Friday. why didn't we use this week to play one of the games in hand?
Yep.
Exactly.
We had that time to go and play that game. I mean, we keep going on, people saying, when we win these games in hand, we'll only be so many points behind. Why are you not screaming out for the fact that we could have played one of these games now? Instead of got to wait to February and March, we don't know how bad this thing's going to go. You look down at the Premier League and you see the amount of teams that are losing 5 and 6 players through the disease right now. There's a potential for games to be called off because of it. And yet we get to a stage where there's a midweek for us to play the game, and we've just went away on a jolly. It was completely unnecessary, and they just anybody that can try and defend it, I don't get your point. I'm sorry.
No, you're right, and Kevin Graham's pitched in to remind us that maybe she's got her bee in her bonnet because we booted the Offensive Behaviour Act into touch. Yeah, I mean, there's another political discussion for another day from Kevin Graham, and it'll be good to speak to him on Monday. One final thing I did want to mention to yourself, Colin, because I know that you keep an eye closely on the youth setup, and we've spoken about it, we've criticised it, we've spoken to ex-players who, every single player who was involved in the reserve league actually thinks it's a massive, massive loss to the game. We're too far ahead now to actually go back to such a setup, Colin, because the infrastructure is no longer there and clubs wouldn't be able to afford to get it up and running again, most clubs. So there's always been this suggestion around the Colts teams. Now, when I was doing my research, this isn't a shameless plug because there is no books left, but when I was doing my research for my first book, I found that era very, very interesting. 1968, when Jockstein, 68, shows how far ahead of his time he was. Jockstein had this plethora of incredible players at his disposal who couldn't get a game because they were trying to displace the Lisbon Lions. So it's the quality street kids. So what Jockstein proposed to the powers that be was that Celtic would have a second team in the league structure. At that time there were only 2 divisions. They would have been in Division B or the second division as it was, and it would be Celtic's Colts. That's what they would be called. So to try and sell that idea to other clubs, etc., Celtic regularly played second division sides all over Scotland, and more often than not the Celtic reserve team won the game and won the games comfortably. But what they were trying to show was that if a Celtic team, even if it was a reserve side, turns up at the Recreation Park in Alloa, you were guaranteed X amount, 1,000 more supporters at that game, even though it's just the Celtic reserves. So it brings in a lot more money to the other clubs. The decisive vote actually came down to Partick Thistle, believe it or not, who kicked the proposal out. But the reason I bring it up is that it's always been there. It's been cited that it's been utilised in other countries such as Spain, and they've done not too badly over the last couple of decades in terms of World Cup and European Cup winning sides. Where you've got a B team in the league structure. You can't get promoted to the top league, obviously, but it's there so that this bridge that you have between youth football, Colin, and the first team, it's just far too wide at this moment in time. It's a gap rather that needs to be bridged, and they reckon that bringing in the Colts teams would be a much better option. So that's back on the table. We spoke at the beginning of the season to Clyde. Danny Lennon was here. We spoke to Dan Lennon about it. We spoke to the director of football at Clyde. They were all for it. They thought it was a great idea. Is this the only way really for us to start producing talent who can step from the reserve or the youth team into the first team again?
I think we are developing the talent. It's just they're not being given the opportunity. And I think this idea of the Colt teams that's been around now for the last 10, 15 years, it is something that really would benefit these players coming through. You look at the guys that's out on loan this season, Kerr McInroy playing brilliantly for Dunfermline. You've got Scott Robertson down the road at Gillingham, I think it is. These guys will get the chance to play if there is a B team there. If not, we've got to loan these guys out. And these players will see the difference between playing youth football and playing professional football. Conor Hazard and Ross Doohan did it last season, respectively, and you saw the sort of influence it's had on Conor Hazard when he's made that step up. He didn't look too far out of place, with the exception of the Scottish Cup final where he was kind of bullied by the more experienced players that were spoke about. So I'd be all for it. It would be great to see like a Celtic B team coming down to Capello and playing against Morton, or playing against Dunfermline, or playing against Edinburgh City. And when we spoke to James McDonough earlier in the season, he agreed. He thought it would be a great idea. But it would involve having a restructure of Scottish football, and every time that comes on the table, it just seems to get knocked out of the park. You saw what happened when Dan Budge tried to arrange things at the start of the season to get a restructure of Scottish football. It just doesn't seem to happen. But if there is one to come through, then I would say that the cult teams of Celtic, Rangers, even teams like Hibs and Hearts have a place in the Scottish football pyramid.
Yeah, I think it would be brilliant for that level, that group of players to be playing competitively. That's what it comes down to. And a lot of the ex-pros speak about the reserve league and talk about, guys who were maybe at the end of their career, Colin, or coming back from injury, and you would learn a lot from them just playing with them or against them. And you can't get that on a training pitch. You've got to experience it. So that's something I'm going to be looking at with interest, because I think that's pivotal for Celtic going forward. Because I do agree with you, we produce players up to a certain stage, but it's getting them into that side and getting them the experience. Because we've not done it often enough. You look at the Celtic side of today, we've got James Forrest and we've got Callum McGregor. There's a few waiting in the wings. There's had a few games, Mickey Johnson, for example. But not a great deal. There's not the kind of nucleus of that side where in years gone by it was. And that's, I think we're going to be looking at that moving into the next 5-10 years of recovering from the economics, the economic impact of the pandemic. Now, it's been an interesting discussion. I think we've kept it as positive as possible, Amy. It's not been that negative, has it? But we will be back with the same contributors on Wednesday of next week, by which time we'll have played against Hibs. Hopefully there are no COVID casualties for that game, because then I can see the club coming in for even more criticism. Thanks everybody for getting involved in the comment section. It's always interesting, let's just say. Quite a few blockages today, so thanks for the heads up. And yes, we will be back again tomorrow at 12:30, so keep joining us. Subscribe on our YouTube channel, and all that's left for me to say is Colin Watt, Amy Canavan, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.